Hello, people of the internet. Welcome to the special report, your news and views program about geek gaming culture on said internet. Come up in this show today, Valve makes a conscious decision to no longer be the moral arbitrators of content on Steam, thereby opening the floodgates according to several media outlets who are basically saying the exact same thing as each other. A discussion about what this all means for the Steam platform and why a lot of these media outlets are saying the exact same thing as each other. All of this, and because I believe that we should celebrate a life of a person who had applauded such things, TotalBiscuit, who passed away a few weeks ago to cancer. We're going to do another OC remix track of the day. My name is JD Shadow, and the special report will start right about now. Valve, in a Steam blog saying, quote, who gets to be on the Steam store, has created a firestorm of controversy, mainly from the gaming written blogosphere and of course the games media, who have decided to, instead of defending gamers and their right to choose what game they want to play, instead deciding that Valve should be the judge, jury, and executioner. In case you do not know of the storyline that had caused this to come forth, let's go into details. Recently, a controversial game known as Active Shooter, which let players, according to Forbes, play as either cops or a school shooter, the former able to gun down police and student victims, had been removed from the Steam platform, not because of its content, although you could definitely know that the content was the reason why they took issue with it and took some attention to it, but because the developer had a really shady history of being, let's just say, unethical. They were known as Revived Games, and this wasn't the first time that the developer and publisher, calling himself Ata Bujivev, is gotta be an Indian name, had been previously removed when he was operating as BC Interactive and Elusive Team. His other games were including White Power, Pure Voltage, and Tide Pod Challenge. Well, there's something that's not going to cause controversy in the slightest. When Revived Games' catalog was removed, Valve said, quote, Ata is a troll with a history of consumer abuse, publishing copyrighted material and user review manipulation. His subsequent return under new business names was a fact that came to light as we investigated the controversy around his upcoming title. We are not going to do business with people who act like this toward our customer or Valve. In other words, the same thing as you would see of an asset flip game, something that has polluted the greenlight system time and time again. The game in question itself had a bit of the same kind of content that Hatred, another controversial game, had, although in that instance, Hatred was seen as an actual game, not a very good one, though it was a game. This one didn't really seem as though it was going to be an actual game, but rather an asset flip or whatever you would take it. However, this was calling into question a few other things that had begun to happen, whereas graphic novels were taken off of Steam as well. The novels were of anime variety, and I'm not going to go any further than that because you pretty much know where we're going with them and why they were subsequently removed from Steam. However, this was taken from some people as Valve catering to certain factions of the right and left-wing political spectrum, the religious right and the authoritarian left, as it were, and not really listening to the majority of people who say, hey, let's just at least have the right to vote with our wallets instead of letting you be the judge, jury, and executioner as to what we should be allowed to spend our money on. And I will get to why this is something that Valve shouldn't have done in the first place in just a moment. But let's go to the lengthy Steam blog. Now, we're not going to go into every single thing because, quite frankly, we're going to be here all day if we read the entire thing. However, Valve's Eric Kane had actually highlighted the important part, and while I'm going to read what he said, I'm going to go into a little bit more context than he did because I want you to get the whole thing. The important part is halfway through it, saying, quote, so we ended up going back to one of the principles in the forefront of our minds when we started Steam, and more recently as we worked on Steam Direct to open up the store to many more developers. Valve shouldn't be the ones deciding this. If you're a player, we shouldn't be choosing for you what content you can or can't buy. If you're a developer, we shouldn't be choosing what content you're allowed to create. Those choices should be yours to make. Our role should be to provide systems and tools to support your efforts to make these choices for yourself and to help you do it in a way that makes you feel comfortable. With that principle in mind, we've decided that the right approach is to allow everything onto the Steam store, except for things that we decide are illegal or straight up trolling. Taking this approach allows us to focus less on trying to police what should be on Steam and more on building those tools to give people control over what kind of contents they see. We already have some tools, but they're too hidden and not nearly comprehensive enough. We are going to enable you to override our recommendation algorithms and hide games containing the topics you're not interested in. So if you don't want to see anime games on your store, you'll be able to make that choice. If you want more options to control exactly what kind of games your kids see when they browse the store, you'll be able to do that. And it's not just players that need better tools either. Developers who build controversial content shouldn't have to deal with harassment because their game exists, and will be building tools and options to support them too. As we mentioned earlier, laws vary around the world, so we're going to need to handle this on a case-by-case basis. As a result, we will almost certainly continue to struggle with this one for a while. Our current thinking is that we're going to push developers to further disclose any potentially problematic content in their games during the submission process, and cease doing business with any of them that refuse to do so honestly. We'll still continue to perform technical evaluations of submissions, rejecting games that don't pass until their issues have been resolved. That last statement is kind of iffy if you would see some of the stuff that has came up on Steam recently. They had let Digital Homicide go without consequence for a good long while until Digital Homicide decided that they were going to just up the ante and up the ante until Valve had enough. So that remains to be seen whether or not the quality curation of the Steam Greenlight system is going to get improved as a direct result on this. One can only hope, because it desperately needs it. And disclosure is always a huge plus. Customers should always have the utmost information in deciding whether or not they want to buy a game or anything. They should be able to have all the information about what the game has, who it's by, what it's for, what's the cost of the game, how does it control, stuff like that. Things that would make somebody, a consumer, make an informed decision. That is their right to have, and you should not be shielding them from that information. But before I get to my thoughts, let's get to what some of the people have said, or in this case, the game media blogosphere has said in direct result of this happening. With, of course, Kotaku having a headline saying Steam's irresponsible hands-off policy is proof that Valve still hasn't learned its lesson. Written by Nathan Grayson, like he has any room to talk about anything irresponsible. Polygon, probably the bottom of the total poll when you go into how credible they are, saying Valve gives up on responsibility, anything goes as long as you give Valve a cut, by none other than Ben Kutra. Yet again, somebody who has no room to talk about these sort of things, and it keeps going. Valve's video game marketplace Steam is now the anti-app store, says Mashable. Game Industry Biz, Brendan Sinclair, saying Valve's new content policy is a gutless attempt to dodge responsibility. PC Gamers, Tyler Wild, saying Steam's new anything goes policy is doomed from the start. Rock Paper Shotgun, saying Valve takes a stand against taking a stand on Steam rules. Extreme Text Joe Ruska, saying Valve's new content policy for Steam is a triumph of cowardice over curation. Eurogamer's Orly Welch, saying Steam's content policy is both arrogant and cowardly. IGN's Tom Marks, saying banning a game from Steam isn't smothering creative freedom. And yeah, it's going on and on and on with similar language, similar reasoning. It sounds like that Sinclair video that you probably have seen and we reported on in the special report a few episodes ago. I imagine that these people were suddenly going to start telling us about fake news and starting to say that Donald Trump is God or something. That's how it feels like it's going to happen, because it can say, oh, we all been brought up by Sinclair Broadcasting Group. Have fun with that. And one particular digital storefront is actively condemning this decision, itch.io. It's apparently their boss, their owner, Leaf at itch.io, tweeting, quote, a platform that allows everything unless it's illegal or straight up trolling is ridiculous. Please keep your malicious, derogatory, discriminatory, bullying, harassing, demeaning content off itch.io. I'll ban buttons already. It's sad that most of the people in that thread are worried about asset flips. What about the fact that Valve is effectively authorizing toxic people to exist on their platform? It is so out of touch. Hard to see that he's not worried about asset flips at all, is he? So if I go to itch.io, I'm going to see things from Digital Homicide on there. Am I going to find stuff from them? Am I going to find the lack of actual quality curation and just worrying about whether or not something is deemed offensive in your mind? Because that's effectively what you are telling me, that you're not going to worry so much about whether or not a game is good or not, but whether or not it falls in line with your political viewpoints. And I wanted to highlight all these people who are saying this kind of stuff, to highlight these people who are suddenly now bitching because this Steam policy now exists, let alone the game existing, before I go into my viewpoints, because my viewpoints effectively are going to tackle both of these at the same time. The reason why Valve did this, and it's painfully obvious to see why Valve did this if you actually look at the content that was being taken down. The fact that we are offended at something is subjective. Not everybody is offended at the exact same thing. There is no cookie cutter explanation to determine, okay, this will offend everybody, or that nobody will be offended by it. There's always going to be that one person. There's always going to be that group of people who are going to say, hey, this offends me for whatever reason, whether it be a legitimate offending a person or a group, or just somebody saying, hey, this should offend me, so I'm going to have a Fox outrage because I just don't like their politics, so I'm just going to say, hey, it offends me. That's the easy way to censor a political viewpoint. Whether or not that political viewpoint is worthy of being amplified or signal boosted is another matter entirely, but you get what I'm saying here. Just because I might be offended of somebody saying a certain word or a certain phrase or a certain viewpoint does not mean that someone else right beside me who has a similar political leaning to what I have may not be offended about that same thing, or something that I might not see as offensive or see as not having any sort of problem might be offensive to someone else who has the exact same political leaning as I do. There are people who have heard racial epithets labeled toward their ethnicity or race or sexual orientation, and they're not worried about it whatsoever. They become desensitized. They become okay with it. They've said, hey, I'm not even bothered by it. I don't let it get to me. Yep, someone else in that same park as them may be completely offended for whatever reason they may have. And you cannot judge that. You cannot look at one particular group and say they're all going to be offended at this one thing. You cannot do that. It's a false equivalency, because there's going to be people in that group who are not offended about something like active shooter. And I'm going to get to why the game itself is important in this whole story in just a moment, but you cannot be offended at everything. There's going to be some things that some people are not going to be offended at and other people are. It's just how it's going to work. And for Steam to be the moral arbitrator is just never going to end well because of that. But it goes much further than that, in that some of these games which have quote-unquote explicit content are actually good games. Like, for instance, the Honey Pop game, the game in which a man has a run of bad luck and he has to go to sort of sex fairy to get laid or whatever sort of story you want to say that is. Yes, it is an adult theme, but the match 3 aspect, the mechanics of the game, are done extremely well. I had a lot of fun playing it. It's not just because it's the scantily clad women, it's because it was a fun game to play, and that should be what gets a game onto Steam. Not necessarily the content or whatever else you want to say is offensive or whatever. Maybe it's good to be offended. Maybe it's a South Park way of being offended. And South Park has been on the air for more than 20 years now. And you've seen how many issues that has tackled, what makes us think on that show, what makes us think about our positions on that show. There are shows that you are in it knowing that they're going to tackle hard issues and they're going to poke fun at those sensitive topics, and if you're offended, then they're going to treat that as a badge of honor because they're going to get their point across. That's how they get a point across. The people who are voting on the Steam greenlight for better or for worse should be the ones that decide whether or not a game should be on Steam. Valve should not be the only voice in that matter. And they're saying that they will not be. They should not be the moral arbitrators. They should not be the judge, jury, and executioner in this situation. Because some of those games that have that type of content, that kind of adult content, are worthy to be on Steam because they are good games. They have good mechanics. You have fun playing them. They are made well. It shows that the developer took time into creating that game, and it took a lot of care into making sure the game was good to be put onto Steam, that people want to have fun playing. And it's not fair to say the creators of Honey Pop or the creators of that graphic novel that might have some adult content in it to be judged solely on that, because quite frankly, some people want to have that content available to them on that platform, and if they don't get that, they're going to find someplace that does have that content and will give them that content. That person who wants to consume that type of content will go to great lengths to get it, if not on Steam, then somewhere else. And quite frankly, Steam is looking at it through that sense, that kind of untouched demographic. If you want to consume that type of content, you have the right to do so. And if you don't want to view that type of content, if you don't want to see that type of content, Steam is saying they are going to improve their resources in order to let you have that choice. And that's what it's all about, is about having that choice, that way of being able to choose whether or not you want to buy that type of content. Just don't buy it. Just don't buy that particular manga. Just don't buy that particular game. It is that simple. Why? Because you have a problem with it, that you want to impose your moral compass on everybody else. And that's what Steam is saying here. Would I buy something like Active Shooter? Would I approve of something like that? Of course I would not. I think it looks like a terrible game. I think it looks like something that was just made up in a few minutes, and the environments look pretty empty and look pretty bland from the trailer that I've seen. However, does that mean that I do believe that people can't make a conscious decision? No, I don't think that. People can make a conscious decision based on what they've seen, and they can make up their own minds. It does not mean that I'm going to impose my will on anybody else, and that's what Steam is doing here. They're not going to impose their will on those people who would like to have that type of content on their Steam library. And if you don't like it, you can simply not buy the game or just put it out of your feed or whatever. But don't expect for people to just go with the flow of you censoring their content. If they want to consume it, fine, let them consume the content. What does that have to do with you? But I do want to touch upon the one thing that I don't think anybody is talking about here, and it's very important that we get into this discussion, because the title that sparked all of this debate, even after all the graphic novels were starting this whole debate, it was the game Active Shooter that really got it going. And the majority of those people who are writing these blogs are not worried necessarily about the adult content as it relates to sexual nature. It has to do with the violent games. It has to do with things like hatred, with things like, dare we say it, Grand Theft Auto. That has a lot to do with what they are saying, and that is especially troubling. Because remember what the main complaint was initially in 1993 critically in order to even make the ESRB rating, which is that games that have violence in them is correlation equals causation. It was causing people to become violent in real life. And you cannot pin any study whatsoever that proves that to be true. Every single study in the world, no matter where you go, is going to tell you the exact opposite. However, them doing this is something that, first of all, flies in the face of what they've said in the past. Now all of a sudden, because for whatever reason, certain authoritarian viewpoints have seeped into the narrative of the blogosphere, both on the right and the left. I do believe that there's authoritarianism on the right wing. That's called the religious right, to be quite honest with you, are now saying that, hey, now we agree with you because we have friends who are within your mindset on the political spectrum, so all of a sudden we're going to take your side on every single little thing. And then it's especially troublesome because what is happening recently? A whole bunch of school shootings, and we're talking about gun rights and gun control. And what is the one thing that's going to get people up in arms and getting people to think not with their heads but with their hearts, which might be in the right place, but at the same time they're not going to be thinking clearly? The violence in games debate. This is going to rear its ugly head again. Something that we've proven false time and time again. Now all of a sudden, because of a reason which I do believe you know I'm going to get to, yes, that's why they're focused on that. But before I get into that, let me just say what should be plainly obvious to everyone involved, especially to Jim Sterling, who has also came out and condemned this game. I do believe that sane people who play the game can separate fantasy from reality. If you can't do that, then you have a load of problems that censoring a game cannot solve. If you can't look at a game and saying, hey, this is just a work of fiction or something that's based off whatever, but you should not be doing this, then you have a lot of problems that I'm afraid that we cannot solve just by taking away a game that might or might not be morally bankrupt. And in the trailer to Active Shooter, there is actually a disclaimer. I'm not sure if you saw it because it only displays for a few seconds, but it does says that this is a computer game and is meant solely for entertainment purposes and simulation. This game contains content and materials not recommended for children and or those seeking to enhance or establish political views and or careers. Revive Games believes violence and inappropriate actions belong in video games and not real world, and insists that in no event should anyone attempt to recreate or mimic any of these actions, events, or situations occurring in this game. This game is only for 18+. You know what else has that kind of disclaimer? Grand Theft Auto 5. And yes, you know where this is going to eventually end up if we keep on the slippery slope and not stop it here, do you? Yep, GTA 5. That's the big game. That's the big one. Eventually it's going to go to there, and eventually it's going to end up saying, hey, we're gamers, so we can't distinguish fantasy from reality. We're too stupid to do that. And that's exactly what these game outlets and these game journalists are effectively doing. They're saying, hey, we're stupid, we can't figure this stuff out to say, hey, this is fantasy. We shouldn't exactly be shooting up a damn school. You know how many years I've been playing video games? For about 35 years. Have I shot up a school recently? Have you heard any stories about me shooting up a school at all? No, you haven't, because correlation does not equal causation. And I know disclaimers can be a dime a dozen, and it might not really prove anything. But you know what? At some point, maybe believe that they are trying to do this just for entertainment purposes, and not trying to tell people, hey, this is okay to do. At some point, we got to be a little bit smarter than that in the game media spectrum. We gotta be a little smarter than that. Games media, you're the people who are trying to link something with the other when in the past you have done everything you can in order to protect us. Now all of a sudden you are not doing that? Yeah, there's something else going on there which I'm pretty sure you know about. Plus, if you effectively censor a game like this, what's gonna happen? people are going to be more curious about it. They want to know what this whole controversy is going to be. And you know what's going to happen. The game is going to get even more popular because now people are going to be incited by the controversy. Controversy equals cash, as Eric Bischoff said in his book. That was the title of his book. Controversy equals cash. People are going to be wanting to know why it was so immoral that it had to be banned by Steam. Like, the one game Steam didn't want you to play, or the one game they didn't want you to see. What is all the fuss about? What is all the hoopla about? And they're going to play it more. It's going to give it more attention. Of course, the way that you let this fall by the wayside is to not give it attention. Don't cover stuff like this. Don't give it the money. Don't give it the attention it seeks. And before anybody tries to say it, no, I'm not talking about stop covering games that use things like what Digital Homicide tried to do in order to get further sales. But I'm talking about those games that are morally bankrupt, or whatever you want to call it, assuming that they are to begin with. That's what gives it the attention. That's what they want. And you're using it to further your own political agenda when you're helping each other out. Stop doing that. That solves nothing. That just gives the game more attention and you more heartache in the end of the day. Something that I would hope you didn't want, but apparently they thrive on drama anymore. I don't understand where we're getting to where that is the it thing to do anymore, is to rile up these groups, just to get these people going in order to give them more views. It was like the authoritarian sides of these whole political spectrums is so big in that they can't live without those views. They can't live without those clicks. And the moderate people are getting thinner and thinner and thinner in the numbers. Somehow that's got to change. Somehow that's got to reverse very, very quickly, or else we're going to get to a point where that's all we do. We're going to kill ourselves on that. And we wouldn't need a game to tell us to do so, assuming that it would do so in the first place. Or, again, that we're so stupid we can't discern fantasy from reality, as these outlets are suddenly thinking we're too stupid to understand. Like, we're too stupid to understand the real reason why they're even caring about this theme policy. And yes, the reason why a lot of these game journalists are doing this now is because, yeah, they backed a lot of indie developers and didn't tell us about it. Yes, we're talking about this, the transparency. This is what it's all about. Do not get it confused. There is a vested interest in all of these people making sure that it's not a qualified game being on Steam, because if these games are allowed to be on Steam, then the games that they backed on Kickstarter and on Patreon or whatever else will not get on it, because now there is added competition and they don't want that. They know that games like Honey Pop are good. They know that these graphic novels are going to get a lot of sales. They know that people are going to want to play these games because that is more of what they want to play. If they want to play an adult game, let them have it. Let them experience it. Let them do that. It doesn't take away anything out of you, but it does take something out of the pockets of those people who you are backing, and not telling us that you're backing them at all. And when somebody tells us, hey, you might want to disclose, guess what you do? Instead of saying, hey, we made a mistake or whatever else to defend the right to keep that secret, what do? You attack and you label people as bigoted. And that is something that we have seen time and time again. And that is the true reason why this is a great decision by Steam, is because it prevents the slippery slope. It prevents somebody from just saying, hey, this is offensive, take it down, because in reality, they just don't like the game competing with them, or they just don't like the political viewpoint that they are showing you, or it bothers them, or dare I say it triggers them. it prevents people from being able to censor a game just because they might not like the developer or stuff like that on those grounds alone. It prevents them from using that as an excuse. It prevents the game journalists from doing that. It prevents malicious people, users on Steam from doing that. It prevents Steam from doing that. It prevents Valve from doing that. And that makes the competitive scene in the gaming marketplace a fair place for everyone. Kudos to Steam for doing this, and hopefully the barrage of people who are trying to attack them, because quite frankly I know what the real reason behind this is, will not cause them to backpedal on this decision. That's going to do it for this edition of the Special Report. Thanks as always for watching. Before I go though, I did say that we are going to still honor the life of somebody who would applaud such things as what Steam did. If you do not know what happened a few weeks ago, John TotalBiscuit Bain had lost his battle with cancer at the age of 33. A very young age to go out of this world like that. So we are going to honor his life by continuing the OC Remixes track of the day until somebody tells me that I shouldn't do it anymore. Hopefully they are okay with it. And we're going to leave you with a track that he did feature on his co-optional lounge, and it is something that I played a lot in my streams when I was on Twitch, and it is a jazzy remix of probably one of my most favorite tracks from Legend of Zelda: Link to the Past. It is called Dark World Jazz from Gux, and if you like what you hear, please go support OC Remix. I'm sure you will enjoy what you find there. Until next time, my name is JD Shadow, and that just happened.